Welcome to Ask the First Selectman. I'm Jim Cameron, your host and program director here of Darien TV 79. This is a new show. If you haven't seen it already, I guess the name kind of implies what it is. John Zagrodzky, the First Selectman, has agreed to answer viewer questions. I've shared with him the topic of the question in advance, but not the verbatim question per se. So he may be surprised by the tone of some of your questions, but we're going to keep it all, civil and among friends too. So, John, thanks for joining us again for another question. This question comes from a person identified as Jim, not me. He says, what's the point of spending millions raising a tarmac parking lot at Pear Tree Beach if the approach road and beach are likely to be underwater? Are you aware that the most significant beach erosion is to occur in recent times was caused by stormwater runoff from the land and not the sea? Rather than fight nature, have you considered replacing the existing tarmac with a well-drained permeable surface that's likely to be cheaper and last longer?
All good questions. The engineers who've taken a careful look at Pear Tree Point came to a few conclusions. One is you're quite right about storm damage to the beach and the erosion that comes from that. And if you look at the proposed engineering solution that they have, it's a combination of raising the beach parking lot itself, but also creating a series of berms along the beach side of the one that faces into the harbor side of Pear Tree Point, so that what happens is you get the same effect that you'd have at Weed Beach, which is by having those berms in place, it creates almost a barrier, if you will, to the erosion that's caused by combinations of storm surge with high tide, which has been very damaging to that beach. And based on the engineering I've seen, it seems like that's the most practical solution that's been developed. In terms of a permeable surface, those are fine, but ultimately the water has to have some place to go. And so when you have a parking lot that's so close to the water, even if you had a permeable surface, it's unclear to me where the water would go, if it would go through that surface. I think the main objective of the engineering that's being proposed is to keep the water out. Now, mind you, there's no perfect solution to any of this, but based on what I've seen, this really does extend the life and protection of the beach out another 50, 75 years based on the forecasts that they included in their research and in the proposal development. So I feel pretty confident that the solution that they've got in place will go a long way to preserving that beach for future generations. The only thing I would add is that in addition to that, there's going to be a reconstruction of the boat ramp that is too shallow. The pitch is too shallow on it right now, as well as dredging around about 3/4 of the boatyard, sort of harbor or marina, if you will, work that has not actually been done since 2001. So that complete project really should help preserve the Pear Tree Point Beach area well into the future. Last thing I'd mention is that we just commissioned Weston and Sampson with a small grant to develop the bid documents for this work. And so one important step in this process is to actually get confirmed bids in terms of what it would cost to do this work. Right now, the total project, which includes the parking lot, the berms, the dredging, and the boat ramp, was estimated without bids by Weston and Sampson at $6.6 million. And so we'll know a lot more once we get bona fide bids in as to how much that project's going to cost. But I'm confident that the investment that's been proposed will help protect that beach well into the future.
Great. Thanks, John. I appreciate you answering the question. If you have a question for the First Selectman, just send it to us by email to darientv79.com. You can use your name if you'd like to have it associated with a question, or you can ask it anonymously. So, John, thanks again for joining us again for answering another question. And stay tuned, viewers, for another edition of Ask the First Selectman.